Discover a W.E. inspiring family secrets through a widow's poignant journey. Rain seeped through the cracked windowpane, hammering a mournful rhythm against the kitchen sink where Clara sat. A wavering flame flickered weakly in the dusty oil lamp, casting shadows over her gaunt face. The room, cramped and dim, was soaked in the stale scent of damp wood and faded memories. Outside, the English countryside was blanketed in gray, the spindly branches of aging oaks scraping against the glass like skeletal fingers longing to reach inside. In her lap, a yellowed envelope trembled. The edges frayed like the threadbare seams of her life, frayed and unraveling. Clara's fingers, pale and trembling, hovered over the embossed stamp, the crest of the local council. Her breath caught. The foreboding letter had arrived just days after her husband's funeral. The cruel irony was not lost on her. A final blow amid the swirling storm of loss. She dared a glance at the harsh, printed words, "Notice of foreclosure." The weight of those letters pressed down like lead gloves. The house, her final refuge from a world that seemed suddenly hollow, was now slipping from her grasp. She could almost hear it, the walls closing in, the floorboards groaning beneath the weight of abandonment. Tears welled quietly, but Clara swallowed them, biting into the inside of her cheek until the taste of blood steadied her. From the corner of the room, the ticking clock punctuated the silence, relentless and unforgiving. Outside the window, a crow cawed, sharp and piercing, breaking through the oppressing stillness. Clara closed her eyes, absorbing the bitter truth. She was alone now, a widow not just in name but in spirit, adrift in a sea of uncertainty and despair. Her auburn hair, usually pulled back tightly, escaped its confines in a hasty bun, strands falling haphazardly around a face marked with shadows of sleepless nights. Her clothes, simple and faded, mirrored an outdated chapter of her own fading identity, the fabric whispering stories of better days she clung to in secret. Behind her, the house groaned and settled, familiar creaks almost sounding like an echo of past laughter, now ghosts haunting this fragile sanctuary. The phone on the counter rang, sharp and jarring, slicing through the thick silence. Clara flinched, staring at it as if it might leap into her hand. The red light blinked insistently as she reached out, fingers stiff, and pressed the receiver to her ear. "Hello?" Her voice cracked like brittle glass. "Mrs. Evans? This is Mr. Hargreaves from the bank," came the low, sterile voice on the other end. "I'm calling about the house mortgage. We need to discuss the situation." Clara swallowed hard, a lodged sob caught deep in her throat. "I know. I received the notice. But there must be something that can be done. I just need more time. I'm afraid the council has been very clear, Mrs. Evans. The payments have been overdue for months. Without new arrangements, the eviction process will start soon." Her eyes fixed on the rain streaking down the window. Time slipping away like grains of sand through desperate fingers. "Is there no other way?" she whispered. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Evans. It's out of my hands." The line went dead. Clara's shoulders slumped. She set the receiver down with the careful gentleness of someone handling a fragile piece of broken hope. Minutes passed. The kitchen clock ticked louder, marking a countdown only she seemed to hear. Her hand dropped to the wooden table, lightly grazing the old oak surface that had borne witness to years of laughter, arguments, and dreams now scattered like dust. She rose slowly, dragging her feet as if the very ground resisted her movement. Her gaze landed on the windowsill where a cracked porcelain cup withered, abandoned like her own spirit. Beside it, an untended plant sagged lazily, leaves yellowing with neglect. Outside, the evening darkened into a murky indigo, swallowing the world in its chill embrace. Shadows deepened inside, creeping up the walls like silent invaders. Clara's fingers ghosted over the faded wallpaper, tracing the faded pattern that had once seemed so cheerful. Now it mocked her loneliness. She moved toward the staircase, each step creaking beneath her weight the house's whispered protest. On the landing, a framed black and white photo caught her eye, a glimpse of a younger Clara, laughing alongside her husband in sun-dappled fields far from present grief. She hesitated, then reached out, fingers trembling, touched the glass as if to bridge that painful gap of time. A soft knock at the door startled her sharp, unexpected. She froze, heart hammering, then shuffled to answer. On the threshold stood a woman in a threadbare coat, hat pulled low. Her eyes, shaded beneath the brim, held a semblance of sympathy wrapped in cold formality. "Mrs. Evans?" "I'm from the council," the woman said, voice clipped. "I'm here to collect the keys." Clara's throat tightened. She stepped back, voice barely a whisper. "I'm not ready." The woman folded her arms, unyielding. "The deadline passed last week. Please hand them over." Between the rain's drum and the distant howl of wind, the room felt suffocating. Clara's fingers curled into fists, knuckles whitening. Her gaze flickered to the sofa, where a dusty, old piano rested, an unplayed tune waiting in the silence. With a shaky breath, she shook her head, voice breaking. "Not yet." The woman sighed, resigned, and retreated into the wet evening, the door clicking shut like a verdict. Clara sank back onto the worn armchair, the house groaning its sorrowful song. Her mind swirled grief, anger, fear tangled like thorny vines. The storm outside intensified, rain thrumming against the roof, lightning flickering through the curtained windows. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering not from cold but from the ache of crumbling certainties. The clock continued its relentless ticking, a heartbeat counting down to an inevitable loss. Outside, the abandoned manor loomed in the distance, ghostly against the storm-darkened sky, a silent sentinel holding secrets that Clara was yet to know, secrets that waited to break through the fog of her despair. She closed her eyes, the faintest whisper of a forgotten past teasing the edges of memory, just beyond reach. In the gathering shadow, Clara's weary spirit waited, trembling on the edge of a new and uncertain dawn. The house had fallen into a prison of silence. Hours bled into one another, and Clara remained seated on the worn armchair by the window, her palms pressed against a rigid stack of her late husband's belongings. Each object was a fragment of a life slipping through her fingers, a crumpled shirt bearing a familiar scent, a cracked watch frozen at the time of their last moment together, and tattered books whose pages whispered voices long gone. The light was pallid and unforgiving, seeping weakly through thick clouds, washing the room in hues of slate and ash. Outside, the rain softened into a fine mist that blurred the edges of the world, as if the landscape itself wanted to shield her from painful reality. Clara's fingers hesitated over an old leather-bound box, finger-trembling as it narrowly avoided spilling its contents: faded photographs, pressed flowers, and folded notes. She inhaled sharply, tasting the stale air tainted with dust and faded promises. Her knees ached from hours spent crouching beside unopened drawers where her husband's last traces lingered untouched. The house breathed with memories, soft echoes of laughter, hushed sorrow, and the sharpest pangs of absence. Yet it felt suffocating, a mausoleum carved out of grief. From a back corner, the dust motes danced lazily in the dim light, spotlighting the silent decay. A forgotten piano, its wood dulled and keys yellowing, stood sentinel. It was a monument to unfinished songs and dreams that death had silenced. Clara's eyes, redrimmed and heavy-lidded, flicked toward a pile of letters scattered across the floor. One slipped free, catching her attention. It was sealed with a weathered crimson wax, the mark barely blurred by time. The handwriting was hesitant but precise, a script she recognized, but had almost forgotten in the cavern of her heart. She reached out, pulling the sealed letter into the shallow circle of light that flooded the table. The name Lydia curved elegantly across the envelope's front, stirring a sharp intake of breath. Her heart pounded against her ribs, the silence of the room now heavy with unsaid words and years of distance. Lydia, her estranged sister in spirit, the rival ghost of her own fractured family. The name was a cipher for all the unspeakable hurts and unresolved grudges that Clara had tried desperately to bury beneath layers of sorrow. Her fingers trembled as they broke the seal, tearing the fragile paper with both care and urgency. The letter smelled faintly of lavender, a scent that transported Clara back to sunlit kitchens and stolen childhood afternoons, memories she thought lost forever. The words etched within were jagged yet urgent, dripping with the pain of regret and the faintest ember of hope. Clara, if you are reading this, then I am gone, but there are things you must know. The past between us is tangled in shadows and silence, yet buried beneath it lies a truth that could free us both. I have left a key to our family manor, a place long forgotten but still holding secrets, treasures not only of gold but of forgiveness. You must go there, not for fortune but for peace. I am sorry for every wound I have caused, for the years lost between us. This is my last attempt to reach you. The letter slipped from Clara's numb fingers, drifting to the floor like a fragile confession. Her breath hitched as the room seemed to contract and expand simultaneously, the walls closing in with sorrow yet opening a sliver for something new. For a moment, the weight on her chest lightened, though doubt surged like bitter waves. Did Lydia's words carry truth or another veil of deception? Could a fractured past truly be mended, or was this a cruel riddle slipped in the shadows of sorrow? The wind moaned outside, threading through the cracks in the window frame. Clara leaned back, the chair groaning beneath her as she stared blankly at the peeling wallpaper. A faint ray of light caught the edge of the letter on the floor, illuminating a faded family crest, a symbol she hadn't seen in years, one she had tried to forget but now glowed with unsettling promise. Her mind whipped to the manor Lydia had hinted at, an abandoned place she had avoided for years, haunted by whispers of old wounds and ghosts best left undisturbed. Clara's breath came shallow and quick, heart awash in a storm of grief, suspicion, and the barest flicker of something daring to grow resilience. The room's stale air shifted subtly, as if inviting her to break free from the cemetery of memories and step toward an uncertain tomorrow. She gathered the scattered letters, the fragile threads of reconciliation woven between the lines, and placed Lydia's letter carefully atop the pile. The piano at the edge of the room caught her eye again. Its untuned keys seemed to pulse with a silent call, as though urging Clara to listen beyond the stillness. A sudden gust rattled the window, the distant echo of thunder rolling over the hills like a low, rumbling answer. Clara's fingers brushed a small brass key nestled inside the leather box, a cold weight cradled between thumb and forefinger. Was it the key Lydia spoke of? A key to answers, to fortune, or to closure? The storm outside intensified, lightning fracturing the sky in jagged shards, momentarily bathing the room in stark white. In that fractured light, Clara's gaze hardened with determination. The long night ahead stretched before her, heavy yet alive with somber possibility. Her breath steadied. The manor was waiting, a shadowed stage set for ghosts and truths, where the first steps toward redemption had to begin. Outside, rain continued its gentle assault, but within Clara, a fragile ember glowed. Something had shifted, subtle, fragile, but undeniable, the very first thread loosening the binds of grief. The gray dawn spilled hesitantly through the heavy curtains, brushing the edges of the room with a reluctant light. Clara stood before the mirror, her reflection ghostly and worn. The auburn strands of hair unraveled messily, as though the night's turmoil had whispered secrets through the darkness. Her eyes, swollen and rimmed with sorrow, held a flicker of something unfamiliar, a fragile ember of resolve. She slid her feet into worn boots and wrapped her old coat tightly around her slight frame, a simple gesture that felt like armor against the world outside. The house groaned quietly, a tired beast reluctant to face the coming day with her. In the silence, the foreclosing weight of trust lost and dreams unmade sat heavy on her shoulders, but the sealed letter from Lydia lay folded in her pocket, a promise of shadows blurred by a faint glimmer of light. The countryside beyond was muted and gray, tangled hedgerows and wild grass tangled like memories too stubborn to die. Clara's breath fogged in the cold air as she locked the door behind her. The clicking latch echoed in the empty street like a countdown. The manor lay miles away, veiled in mist and silence, a relic of a fractured heritage and ghosts that had carved their names into every brick and beam. Its once grand silhouette rose like a faded sentinel, swallowed by overgrown gardens where wild ivy and thorny brambles held dominion. The place whispered potency and pain in equal measure. As Clara's boots crunched on the gravel path, the wind stirred an ancient melancholy through the hollowed trees, their skeletal branches entwining against the heavy sky. Her fingers brushed the letter's edge in her coat pocket, weathered and worn, yet stubbornly intact. She approached the rusting iron gate, its hinges worn by years of neglect. The lock was brittle, yet it surrendered with a soft creak to the small key Lydia's letter mentioned, the cold metal biting into Clara's palm with silent promise. Inside the manor's shadowed halls, the air was thick with dust and forgotten histories. Chipped plaster peeled like old wounds, revealing the bare bones beneath, and broken windowpanes rattled faintly, breathing cold drafts that tangled with the scent of musty wood and faded grandeur. Clara's footsteps echoed hollowly as she passed vacant rooms, their silence punctuated only by the distant sigh of the settling house. Each step was heavy with hesitation and hope, a delicate dance between fear and the yearning for answers. In the dim light, the grand piano sat draped in a shroud of dust, keys yellowed, whispering of melodies long silenced but waiting patiently in the shadows. Clara's gaze lingered, a fragile tether to a childhood echo, a lost harmony between kin and past. Her hands trembled as she pressed a single key, the tone brittle yet awakening a fragile reverie. A hollow, distant laughter seemed to ripple faintly through time, a haunting echo of youthful days entwined with Lydia sisters bound by blood but severed by secrets. Drawn deeper into the manor's heart, Clara's eyes caught a dusty desk tucked beneath a fractured window, where a small, leather-bound diary rested, a worn and ancient book with Lydia's name embossed in fading gold. Opening it revealed cryptic messages, jagged script clawing at the pages, a jigsaw puzzle of regret, hope, and unspoken truths. The very pages whispered fractures that had splintered them apart, but also an ache to bridge the chasm left in their wake. Doubt flickered like a restless flame. Was this a path toward fortune or just another snare woven in pain? Yet the threads of the past, intermingled with quiet forgiveness hidden between lines, beckoned Clara onward. She paused, heart pounding, the stale silence thick with unasked questions. A sudden snap of a floorboard behind her shattered the stillness, sharp and urgent. Clara froze, breath hitching. From the shadowed hall emerged a figure tall, wrapped in the worn coat of a stranger, eyes guarded yet probing. "You're not alone." The voice was low, edged with an unfamiliar authority. "There are others with a claim here. I came to see for myself." Clara's heartbeat leapt, a surge of startled defiance rising alongside confusion. The quiet solitude she had sought fractured by an unexpected presence, a reminder that fractured families never truly disentangle. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice trembling but firm. "A cousin. Or perhaps a guardian of what's left," he replied, stepping forward, eyes not unkind but edged with steel. "We both have rights. The manor is no longer just a memory." The room seemed to hold its breath as two threads of inheritance tangled in the dim light, old grudges lurking beneath the surface of shared blood. Clara's gaze swept the dust-speckled beams, then lingered on the piano once more, where shadows of the past still sang a melancholy tune. With a slow inhale, she straightened, a new clarity settling. The manor was both prison and key. In its fractured silence lay the path not only to fortune but to redemption and reconciliation. The abandoned house no longer whispered only loss. It hummed with possibilities, fragile, trembling, but alive. Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting shards of warm light that filtered through the cracked windows, spilling golden hues onto the wooden floor. For a heartbeat, the dust sparkled like tiny stars, a silent promise of change. Clara closed her eyes and let the warmth wash over the heavy weight inside her chest, a fragile piece nesting in the storm. The journey ahead was uncertain, tangled in shadow and light, but for the first time since the loss, she felt the stirrings of purpose. The manor's secrets beckoned, and Clara, with the stubborn grace of survival, took her first step into the unfolding mystery. A brittle wind sliced through the cracked windows of the manor as Clara stepped cautiously over fallen beams and rotted floorboards. The cold nipped at her cheeks, flushing her pale skin, and the musty scent of damp wood, mildew, and old paper clung to the air. Each footfall echoed a hollow beat in the cavernous silence. The once opulent halls, now draped in peeling wallpaper and shadow, seemed to whisper Lydia's secrets in every creak and sigh. Her heart hammered, a mixture of fear, sorrow, and reluctant resolve tightening in her chest. The letter's promise lingered like a fragile thread, tenuous but real. Clara had crossed the threshold from shattered grief into something desperate and undefinable hope tinged with dread. Dust motes floated lazily in the shafts of weak sunlight filtering through grimy panes, catching on broken chandeliers and strewn tattered curtains that shuddered faintly in the draught. Her fingers brushed a splintered banister as she ascended a grand staircase warped by time, the wooden steps threatening to betray her weight with every strained creak. The manor's faded glamour contrasted sharply with its decay. A torn tapestry fluttered high above, threads undone like the memories tangled within these walls. Clara paused in a room where a solitary chair sat facing a shattered mirror, the glass fractured in jagged shards like sharp wounds. She stared for a moment into her reflection, disheveled, determined, worn but somehow there. At the room's edge stood the grand piano, its ivory keys yellowed and coated in grime. Fingers hesitant, Clara pressed a note. The sound was brittle but alive. The silence then embraced her, broken only by the distant drip of water leaking through the broken roof. She pulled Lydia's letter from her pocket again, the words blurring slightly in the dim light. She had come searching for closure, maybe a fortune, but what she found now was a tangled puzzle of memories and mystery. Rummaging through a scattering of old furniture, Clara uncovered a small, locked chest, its brass fittings lusterless and tarnished. Fingers fumbling with the key Lydia had sent, she felt a surge of adrenaline when the lock clicked open. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, lay a bundle of faded photographs, yellowed letters, and a delicate silver locket, its surface etched with an intricate family crest. As she lifted the locket, a draft stirred the papers, revealing one letter, handwritten in Lydia's careful script. The words spoke of regrets, promises broken, and a hidden place within the manor, something left undone, a secret buried beneath layers of family strife. But as Clara pressed further, the air grew thick with a tangible tension. A sudden noise, a soft creak from the floor above, pulled her gaze upward. Silence quickly followed, but Clara's breath caught. Was she alone? The manor seemed to hold its breath. With hesitant steps, she moved towards the shadowed stairwell leading to the upper floors, each step accompanied by the dull scrape of dying leaves pressed beneath her boots. The thin light failed to reach the landing ahead, swallowed by darkness and peeling wallpaper. Her thoughts churned. Was Lydia's letter a beacon or a trap? What was left to uncover in this labyrinth of shadows? The faint rustling persisted, subtle but insistent, as if the manor itself was speaking through the creaking wood. Clara steadied her breath, senses sharpening in the sinking light. Her fingers curled tightly around the locket, its cold metal grounding her. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "I have to know." And with that fragile but fierce resolve, she stepped into the obscurity of the upper floor, the manor swallowing her whole as the distant twilight faded into a rising, unnatural quiet. The dim light of the attic barely touched the edges of the room, and yet Clara's eyes strained to make sense of the yellowed pages she held trembling in her hands. The diary felt heavier than its fragile binding, as if every word etched inside was a secret burden passed between sisters long estranged. Dust swirled in lazy spirals around her, caught in faint rays of fading daylight slipping through cracks in the warped roof. Opening the ancient book, Clara's gaze fell on Lydia's handwriting, slanted, hurried, punctuated with sudden breaks and cryptic symbols she couldn't immediately decipher. The diary was a fragile map of unresolved pain and guarded confessions, a key to a past carved in silence and shadow. For Clara, one passage began, the letters smudged but deliberate. There are truths I never dared voice, walls I never wanted to breach. But the treasure is ours if you can face the ghost beneath the stone, the lie behind the smile. Clara's breath hitched. The words stirred something long dormant, with a hope and a warning. The manor, the hidden fortune, her fractured past with Lydia tangled in a web thicker than she had imagined. She flipped hurriedly through the pages, each curl and smudge pulling her further into a labyrinth of memories. There were accusations veiled in poetic sorrow, moments of sisterly love wrapped in regret, and hints of betrayal so raw that Clara's fingers itched to tear the book apart. Outside, the sky shifted suddenly, a gathering storm rumbling low and distant. The windows rattled in weak panes as the first raindrops tapped Morse code warnings on the glass. The mood inside thickened with tension like the charged air before electrical discharge. As she traced a cryptic symbol, a jagged key entwined with a rose, Clara felt the sting of doubt. Was Lydia a guiding light or a mischievous specter weaving riddles to trap her? Had their sisterhood been nothing but a war disguised in affection? A slip of paper, hidden between diary pages, caught Clara's attention. She unfolded it carefully. It was a hastily drawn map-sketch of the manor's grounds with strange annotations and a peculiar mark near the east wing. Heart-thrumming, she pressed the paper to the window, the gray light revealing the outline of the overgrown garden below. That place, the wild tangle of vines and broken statue shod, always held a mythic aura, an unsolved puzzle from their childhood. Clara's hand clenched the diary. She knew going deeper meant confronting not just the manor's decay but the fracturing of a family's soul writ deep across bricks and bones. The rain grew heavier, a relentless curtain obscuring the world, isolating her in this sacred clearing between past and future. Just then, a sharp creak sounded behind her. Spinning around, Clara's eyes locked on a shadow moving near the stairwell. "Who's there?" Her voice trembled but bore a steel that surprised even her. A figure emerged from the gloom, a man, tall and unfamiliar, his gaze wary yet oddly familiar. His coat was damp, hair curling slightly from the rain. He smiled faintly, but his eyes bore the weight of secrets. "You shouldn't be in this part of the house," he said quietly, voice low and cautious. Clara held up the diary defensively. "I'm looking for answers. This place holds my family's history." He stepped closer, expression unreadable. "I know who you are, and what you're after. But you're not the only one with a claim here." Her heart pounded fiercely. "Then who are you?" He hesitated, then replied, "A relative, like you. A guardian of this legacy." Doubt and confusion wrestled within Clara's gaze. This revelation twisted the fragile thread of hope tangled with fear into something sharper, an uncertain contest for truth and inheritance. The rain battered the roof in a staccato rhythm, the manor's shadows stretching long and thin like silent observers to the unfolding drama. Clara swallowed hard, clutching the diary as if it might shield her from the gathering storms both outside and within. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why after all these years?" The man's eyes flickered with something almost kind, yet resolute. "Because some shadows never rest. Because the past isn't done with us yet." A flicker of lightning illuminated the cracked ceiling, casting fractured light across their facessa, moment suspended between threat and fragile alliance. Clara looked down at the diary again. The cryptic symbols seemed richer now, alive with meaning she hadn't yet grasped. The line between ally and adversary blurred as seconds stretched thin, and the weight of inherited secrets settled heavier than ever before. Outside, the storm deepened, the house creaking and sighing as if alive, harboring in its depths the answers Clara must unearth even if they shattered what little peace she had reclaimed. With a slow breath, she stepped forward, a tentative spark of courage igniting in the gathering gloom. Yet the question writ large in her mind refused to fade. How much of the truth would she bear? And at what cost? The heavy wooden door groaned in protest as Clara pulled it open, revealing the narrow corridor beyond bathed in the pale wash of late afternoon light filtering through grimy windows. Her breath came uneven, a tight knot of tension winding tighter in her chest. The presence of the stranger, the man who claimed kinship, lurched her from fragile hope toward a new terrain of uncertainty and guarded suspicion. She gripped the diary and folded map tightly to her chest, the leather binding rough and worn like the past she had tried to unravel. Her eyes, wary but resolute, met the stranger's steady gaze. He stepped forward, the creak of his boots scraping the uneven floor sounding too loud in the suffocating silence. "You have every right to be here," he said quietly, voice steady despite the charged atmosphere. "But so do I." Clara's fingers clenched the diary, the edges biting into her skin. "Then what do you want?" "To protect what's left of our family's legacy," he replied, his eyes reflecting a history she could only guess at. "There's more at stake than a hidden fortune." The flood of words unsaid hung heavy between them, thick as the dust motes swirling in the shafts of fading light. Clara hesitated, then nodded slowly. The duel of silence was broken not by confrontation but by cautious kinship, a fragile truce forged in the shadows of shared history. Together, they moved deeper into the manor, footsteps measured yet reluctant, tracing corridors that felt suspended between time and decay. The house seemed to breathe around the meech-faded tapestry, whispering echoes of laughter and secrets, each cracked wall holding the weight of buried memories. They reached the study where a tall bookcase leaned unevenly, supporting the burden of countless tomes. Clara pulled the map from her pocket again, laying it reverently on an ancient desk. "This mark," she said, pointing to the strange symbol near the east wing, "it might be the clue to Lydia's hidden fortune." The man ran a hand through unruly hair, nodding. "There's a cellar beneath that wing. Often used as a safe space in turbulent times, but it's been sealed for years." A sudden sharp noise, a distant crash, shattered the stillness. Both turned swiftly, hearts pounding, eyes searching through shadows. "This house isn't empty," Clara said, voice trembling but firm. "Or maybe the past isn't done with us," he whispered. Time seemed to fold inward as the tension built. The house was no mere ruin. It was a crucible where past betrayals and loyalties intertwined, where truths waited dangerous and unyielding. They approached the east wing door, its peeling paint worn smooth by neglect. Clara's hand hesitated on the ancient iron handle, every instinct urging caution, every breath sharp with anticipation. She turned to the stranger, searching his face. "No more secrets," she vowed quietly. "Not if we're to find the truth." He met her gaze, determination mirrored in his eyes. Together, then. The door yielded with a reluctant creak, revealing a spiral staircase that descended into shadow and damp. Moisture clung to the stone walls, emanating the chill of forgotten depths. Step by step, their boots echoed hollowly down into the cellar's breathless darkness, each footfall peeling back layers of silence and dust. At the bottom, the beam of Clara's flashlight caught the glint of rusted metal, a heavy iron lock, firmly sealed but not impenetrable. Using the key found tucked in the piano earlier, Clara inserted it with a tentative hope, turning slowly until the lock gave birth to a harsh rasp. Beyond the threshold lay a narrow chamber lined with old crates and wooden chests, relics of a family history both precious and perilous. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten secrets. As Clara pushed aside the nearest crate, the dusty surface gave way to reveal glimmers of gold jewels, coins, and ornate trinkets, relics of a fortune that was more than wealth. It was a testament to survival amidst ruin. But amidst the treasures, a small, weathered box caught Clara's eye. Kneeling, she opened it and found a delicate reel-to-reel tape recorder, dust-coated yet miraculously undamaged. Her breath caught a pulse of connection reverberated through the chamber. The recorder was not just an artifact. It was a voice from the past, a key to the mysteries Lydia had left behind. "What is it?" the stranger asked, a flicker of unease threading through his tone. Lydia's voice, Clara whispered, fingers trembling as she pressed the play button. The screen flickered to life, static hissing like distant ghosts before Lydia's unmistakable voice emerged. "If you're hearing this, Clara, then the path is open but treacherous. I have no choice but to confess what I could never say aloud. Our family's history is darker than you know. What you find will change everything. Trust no one except yourself." The room seemed to close in, the weight of those words settling like a living thing between them. The fragile hope that had kindled moments before cracked under the strain of revelation. Clara's eyes filled with tears not of sorrow but fierce determination. The inheritance was more than jewels and money. It was a tangled knot of betrayal and love, truth and deception. She looked at the stranger, breath shallow, voice brittle. "We're not just chasing a fortune. We're chasing the truth." The tape hissed on, Lydia's voice threading through the dim cellar air. "Remember, Clara, sometimes the deepest wounds hide the most healing." A distant rumble of thunder shook the manor's bones, as if warning that the storm was far from over. And in that charged silence, Clara realized the journey ahead would demand everything she had: courage, trust, and the willingness to confront the darkest corners of a fractured past. The evening had curled into a cold shadow, swallowing the manor in an oppressive silence that pressed against Clara's chest like a stone. The heavy wooden floorboards groaned faintly beneath her hesitant steps, echoes lost in the vast loneliness of the great house. Outside, rain fell in steady sheets, a relentless curtain erasing the world beyond these walls, isolating her in a cocoon of gray and despair. Clara slumped by the cracked window frame, the cold seeping through the gap where the glass had shattered long ago. Her fingers traced absent patterns on the damp wooden ledge, trembling slightly as her breath fogged the glass. The blurred shapes of twisted branches outside reached inward, skeletal and accusing. Her hair was loosely gathered now, strands falling like forgotten promises around her pale face. Her clothes hung on her frame as though borrowed, threadbare and faded, mirroring the echoing emptiness she felt inside. The house around her was a mournful congregation of decay-peeling wallpaper, crumbling plaster, and muted colors that seeped into her soul like the encroaching darkness. She pulled the diary from her coat pocket, its pages dog-eared and faintly stained with tears that had dried too long ago. The cryptic messages and fleeting hints of sisterly love now felt like shards of glass, sharp reminders of a bond twisted and broken. Betrayal settled deep beneath her skin, a cold whisper that the family she thought she knew was nothing more than a ghostly shadow. The tape recorder lay silent on the nearby table, its secrets folded away but alive in her mind. Lydia's voice echoed, still half apology, half warning, reverberating through the lonely hollows of the manor and the fragile chambers of Clara's heart. The stranger's face haunted her thoughts, equal parts ally and enigma, a reminder that the line between friend and foe was thin, blurred by history and blood. Clara's knees grew weak, and she sank further into the worn armchair by the fireplace, the embers long extinguished, leaving only cold ashes. The air was heavy, thick with a scent of smoke and forgotten memories, suffocating as the weight of revelations bore down. She closed her eyes, but the darkness was not comforting. It was a void that swallowed her resolve, replacing it with a frantic desperation to hold on to something tangible in a world slipping away. Her thoughts spun into fragmented images, moments of laughter now faded, promises broken like dry twigs underfoot, and the hollow ache of a sister's absence she never fully understood. A raspy breath escaped her lips, matching the whisper of wind through the cracked shutters. No words came to mend the fractures. Silence grew thick between the walls, an oppressive companion. She reached out, the scratch of paper sharp against her fingers. It was Lydia's last letter, folded and worn, the edges curling like withered leaves. Clara unfolded it slowly, the familiar scrawl mocking her agony with its echo of forgiveness and hope. But here, in this moment, forgiveness seemed distant and unreachable shore beyond the storm-tossed sea of her despair. Minutes stretched endlessly. The rain hammered against the roof, drowning out even the faint creaks of the settling house. Clara's gaze drifted to the dusty piano standing sentinel in the corner, a relic silent and empty, its keys darkened and faded. She rose unsteadily, crossing the room with a heavy, stumbling gait. Her fingers hovered over the keys, hesitant, then pressed down. The notes emerged fragile, uneven, steeped in sorrow, echoing through the desolate manor like a requiem for lost dreams. Her breath hitched, a quiet sob trembling in her throat. Around her, the house seemed to shudder with grief, the shadows lengthening and thickening like a shroud. Time had no meaning here. The only certainty was the slow unraveling of her strength, her hope, and the very fabric of the family she had once clung to. And in the stillness, Clara felt herself slipping, a fragile thread fraying into the void, swallowed whole by the dark heart of the manor's secrets. The dim light in the drawing room flickered weakly, offering little resistance to the encroaching shadows that pooled in heavy curtains and dark corners. Clara sat slumped on the faded settee, the weight of the house pressing over her, the steady drip of rain leaking through fractured windows filling the hollow space. Each drop echoed like a slow heartbeat in the vast emptiness around her, a repetitive reminder of time slipping, forgiveness denied, and love lost. Her fingers trembled around the fragile cassette player resting on the cracked mahogany table. The device, dusty and battered, suddenly seemed a fragile vessel holding the last tether to Lydia's sister she had never truly known, yet whose voice now haunted the hollows of her heart. Clara pressed play. Static hissed, mingling with the gentle creak of the recorder's mechanisms, until a fragile voice spilled out, Lydia's. Unvarnished, raw, filled with remorse and anger and a sorrow that seemed to choke the sound itself. Clara, the recording began. Lydia's tone both cold and fractured. We were never meant to be the sisters they dictated we become. Too much silence. Too many lies. I wanted to reach you, but the walls were too high and the past too heavy. Clara closed her eyes, vision swimming with tear-blurred shadows. The words felt like shards, each fragment piercing deeper than the last, opening wounds she thought had begun to close. There was no reconciliation here. Only a brutal unveiling of fractures so vast and jagged they threatened to swallow everything she was clinging to. The rain outside intensified, hammering the roof with cold insistence. Gusts swept hollow through the manor's open corridors, rattling old doors and twisting torn curtains like ghosts grasping for remnants of lost warmth. Clara's breath halted in her throat, icy tendrils crawling beneath her skin. The fireplace sat cold and empty, a blackened cavity where light once lived, now only hollow and dead, a shan aching mirror for her spirit. Her gaze wandered to the grand piano in the corner, silent, keys stained with dust and time, untouched by recent hands. She stood and moved toward it, each step slow, weighted by the gravity of her unraveling. Her fingertips grazed the worn keys, trailing dust that floated like faded dreams in the stale air. She pressed a middle key sharp, discordant. The jarring note echoed in the cavernous room, reverberating off cracked walls and broken memories. A cold wind whispered through the broken window panes, extinguishing the last flicker of candlelight on the piano's surface. Darkness rushed in, swallowing the fragile glow, leaving her alone with the haunting silence. In that void, Clara felt the final thread snap, each secret, every betrayal, tightening the noose around her fragile hope until it suffocated. She sank to the floor beside the piano, cold seeping through thin fabric, her body curling inward, a protective shell against the relentless ache. The room held its breath with her, heavy with absence and the weight of words unspoken. Through the latch of closed doors and cracked walls, the past whispered relentlessly, fractured laughter, bitter arguments, years of unresolved longing now laid bare in Lydia's voice. The cassette sputtered and died, leaving only hollow silence to fill the spaces between the shadows. Clara remained motionless, eyes fixed on a cracked mirror above the fireplace. The fractured glass distorted her reflection into countless shards, each a fractured fragment of who she might have been. The rain subsided to a soft murmur, yet inside her, the storm raged relentless. No tears came now, only a deep, engulfing numbness that blurred the edges of reality. Time slipped away unnoticed as Clara drifted beneath the weight of loss, trapped in a silence so profound it swallowed all hope. And in that stillness, the manor seemed to fold inward upon itself, its walls pressing closer, the darkness closing in, for not even the faintest flicker of light remained in the heart of this broken house. The chill in the manor was bone-deep as Clara drifted through the shadowed corridors, her footsteps soundless, swallowed by the silence that had become her constant companion. The weight of betrayal and grief had sunk into her very bones, emptying her of the strength she once clung to like a lifeline. Outside, the relentless drizzle blurred the world into a gray watercolor, the wind pushing through broken windows with a mournful sigh that seemed to echo the hollow ache inside her. In the corner of a forgotten room, beneath a heavy cloak of dust, something caught Clara's weary gaze. The flickering light of her candle danced across the delicate edge of a small envelope, wedged beneath the faded floral fabric that once covered an armchair. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, uncovering the fragile paper with reverence and aching hope. The envelope was sealed with a faded wax imprint, a crest she recognized but had not seen since childhood. Her breath caught, and time itself seemed to hold its breath. Inside was a letter, its fragile parchment curling at the edges, ink faded but unmistakable. The handwriting was Lydia's, a whisper from a past laden with pain and love intertwined. The words moved her with the softness of a secret forgiveness. For Clara, forgive me. Forgive all that was lost between us, the silence, the walls we built. There is more than gold hidden here. There is a path to heal, if you are willing to follow the light through darkness. Clara's fingers traced the final line as tears spilled slowly, unbidden but cleansing. A faint pulse of warmth stirred within, a fragile remembrance of something almost forgotten, hope. She folded the letter carefully, holding it to her chest like a fragile promise. Around her, the manor seemed less like a tomb and more like a doorway, whispering that redemption still lingered in crumbling walls and overgrown gardens. Her gaze turned toward the piano resting in the shadows, a silent sentinel of forgotten melodies. The same piano where, as a child, laughter and music had once entwined with Lydia's presence, before silence had stolen their harmony. With slow, tentative steps, Clara approached. Her fingers hovered above the keys, hesitant, as if touching the surface of the past itself. Then, with a breath drawn deep from somewhere untouched by loss, she pressed a single key. A single note emerged, soft, broken, but unmistakably alive. The sound quivered in the still air, weaving through the dust particles that caught the faint glow of her candlelight. For a fleeting moment, the room seemed to exhale, the oppressive weight lifting just enough for a whisper of light to filter through. Clara closed her eyes, a fragile smile trembling at the corner of her lips. The note was imperfect, but it was a beginning. Not just of music, but of something deeper, a trudging step toward reconciliation, toward the unknown path Lydia had hinted at. She clutched the letter once more, a silent vow forming amid brokenness. In the dim glow of the manor's fading light, with rain gentling to a quiet patter against the panes, Clara allowed herself to believe, if only for a moment, that even the darkest nights could give way to dawn. And somewhere, just beyond the shadows, the secret waiting to be uncovered pulsed quietly, beckoning her forward. Morning seeped cautiously through the grime-coated windows, bathing the manor's once dreary interiors in a tentative wash of pale gold and soft amber. The silence that once blanketed the house like an oppressive shroud began to morph, shifting ever so subtly into a quiet expectancy, an almost imperceptible promise that light could return here, too. Clara stirred from her restless sleep, the letter clutched like a talisman still nestled in her palm. The words Lydia had written haunted her mind, not as daggers now but whispers of hope and a yearning long suppressed. Rising slowly, she moved through the rooms with a tentative grace, the faded carpets and cracked plaster walls less daunting beneath the warm caress of dawn. In the corner where the dusty piano stood a sentinel of cradle songs and yet-to-be-heard melodies, Clara paused. The instrument seemed less a relic now, more a bridge between what was lost and what might still be reclaimed. Fingers tracing the worn wood, she thought of childhood laughter echoing through this house, of sisterhood once vibrant before silence grew. Her eyes drifted to the faded wallpaper, its muted blues tinged with emerging hints of morning sunlight, colors she hadn't noticed before, subdued but yearning to bloom again. It was as if the manor itself was shrugging off years of neglect and sorrow, awakening slowly from a long, dark dream. Clara's breath caught as she studied a pattern on the wall, an ornate flourish, overlooked before, woven into the peeling fabric of the wallpaper. Symbols she had glimpsed in Lydia's diary came alive in her mind's eye, a map of secret doors not just hidden within stone and timber but inscribed in memory and love. With trembling hands, she unfolded the journal once more, tracing cryptic notes that led to clues missed in her first reading. The pieces were falling into place, fragile shards forming the outline of a path, a route through shadow and doubt toward a truth Lydia had sought to reveal. Clara spoke softly as dawn spilled fully across the floor, her voice carrying in the stillness like a prayer or a vow. There is a way forward. The heavy silence deepened, not with weight but with anticipation. A breeze tousled the curtains, lifting dust motes that sparkled briefly in the newly returned light, like tiny stars reborn in the forgotten sky of the manor's heart. Outside, the garden beyond the cracked French doors was wild and tangled, but beneath the overgrowth, delicate shoots of green hinted at renewal. Clara stepped through the threshold, the morning sun warming her face, and she allowed herself to feel the fragile stirrings of courage. She thought of Lydia, of all the wounds etched between them, and found the first trace of forgiveness softening the sharp edges of her sorrow. Her footsteps led her to the grand staircase, each creak now less like a groan and more like a tentative invitation. Turning to the walls that bore the family's faded portraits, Clara saw not ghosts, but echoes, reminders that life, even when broken, held space for healing. As she ascended, the morning spilled through stained glass windows, scattering shards of color across the worn banister, blues deepening to violet, amber rinsing into gold. The transition was slow but undeniable, like a heartbeat returning after a long pause. Clara pressed a palm to the wood, as if reaching out to the sister who had left clues and forgiveness in her wake. "I'm coming," she whispered, the smallest flicker of resolve weaving through her tone. Her gaze lifted to the attic door above, the next step on a journey fraught with fear and hope, a fragile bridge between past sorrow and the possibility of redemption. The manor held its breath with her. The dust stirred, light shifted, and in that suspended moment, Clara embraced the undeniable change was beginning, fragile and unsteady, but no longer beyond reach. The air grew thinner as Clara ascended the narrow, creaking staircase to the attic, each footfall a tentative drum in the vast silence of the manor. Beams above stretched like cathedral ribs, their faded timber glowing faintly in the soft light spilling through grimy, cobweb-draped windows. Shadows flickered and twisted as she moved, but her resolve sharpened with every step. The despair that had clung to her was loosening, replaced by a fragile, growing determination. Her breath came steady now, echoing rhythmically like a heartbeat intertwined with the pulse of the old house. The map Lydia had left folded tightly in her pocket was both a compass and a promising thread weaving through the maze of secrets. The attic door groaned softly as she pushed it open, revealing a space crammed with relics of forgotten days, weathered trunks, faded photographs, and stacks of brittle letters chained by fading ribbons. Each item seemed to hold a fragment of their shared past, a testament to lives once vibrant but now arrested by silence. Clara's fingers brushed lightly over a cracked wooden chest nailed shut for decades. Her pulse quickened. With care born from renewed purpose, she pried it open, releasing a musty scent of age and memory. Inside lay an assortment of small boxes, yellowing journals, and a velvet pouch sealed tight. Every object stirred the dust that danced in golden rays of afternoon light, the attic no longer a tomb but a sanctuary of possibility. She pulled the pouch free and opened it to reveal a cluster of ornate, shimmering jewels, family heirlooms lost to time, gleaming with a subdued brilliance that defied the shadows. Clara inhaled sharply, the weight of discovery anchoring her to a justice she had never dared to imagine. These were not merely treasures of fortune, but symbols of legacy, pain, and the bonds that could still bind fractured hearts. Among the jewels lay a folded note, Lydia's handwriting unmistakable in its delicate loops and curves. With trembling hands, Clara unfolded it. "To my sister, my blood, these jewels carry our history, but more importantly, the hope of a future we might still share. Find them, and find me in their light." A sudden gust rushed through the cracked windows, lifting strands of Clara's auburn hair like flames licking the fading dusk. The attic seemed to breathe, alive with the breath of reconciled pasts and uncertain tomorrows. Clara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sorrow, but a raw, aching joy blooming cautiously amidst the ruins. She spoke softly, voice breaking the heavy silence. "Lydia, I hear you." The afternoon sun dipped lower, bathing the attic in hues of amber and rose. Each glint of the jewels caught the light, fracturing it into delicate rainbows, fragments of hope shattered, scattered, and yet dazzlingly real. Her gaze drifted to a dusty piano propped against the far wall, keys yellowed but intact. Without hesitation, Clara sat and pressed a single note. The sound was tentative but pure, a clear beacon calling across years of silence. The manor seemed to exhale, shadows retreating as warmth unfolded in the golden stains on the wooden floor. In that luminous quiet, Clara saw the path ahead not as a burden but a promise. She smiled, fragile but sure, the first step taken on a journey not just toward treasure, but toward healing, a fragile redemption born of courage and love. Outside, the sky stretched wide and forgiving, a canvas brushed with twilight's gentle hues, holding space for the dawn that must follow. Clara stood bathed in the dying light that spilled like molten gold through the attic's grimy windows. The jewels rested heavy in her palm, family heirlooms steeped in the fractures of time and the silent tides of forgiveness. In their cold shimmer, she saw more than mere stones. She saw the resilient pulse of lineage, a beacon that had withstood years of shadow and silence. Around her, the attic had transformed from a crypt of bygone memories into a sanctum of awakening. The dust sparkled like scattered stars caught in settling beams of light, and the silence was no longer hollow but ripe with unspoken promises. A soft breeze stirred, teasing the tattered curtains and lifting strands of Clara's auburn hair like embers blown from an ancient flame. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she breathed without the weight of sorrow pressing down on her chest, her breath steady and sure. Her gaze drifted across the room to the piano, that forgotten instrument where music and memory once wove their delicate dance of sisterhood. She crossed the creaking floorboards with newfound grace, each step a measured beat in the symphony of redemption playing out within her. With deliberate calm, Clara lowered herself onto the piano bench, the worn leather creaking softly beneath her. Her fingers hovered above the keys, hesitating not from doubt, but reverence. Then slowly, she pressed a key. A note rang clear and pure, a singular call reaching through the dust and shadows. The echo unfurled like a long-held sigh, weaving through the attic and beyond, stitching together the torn fabric of her past. Her fingers danced lightly over the keyboard, coaxing a melody that was both sorrowful and hopeful, a song of endings and beginnings. As the music filled the space, Clara's thoughts settled, turning inward. The fractured reflections in the attic's cracked mirror caught the sun's last rays, splintering light across the floor like scattered jewels, reminders of fragmented pain now tempered by grace. She whispered, voice steady, "Lydia, I see you. Not as the past that haunted me, but as the sister who reached through the darkness. I carry you with me, in every note, every step." The house seemed to listen, the ancient timbers breathing gently in harmony, shadows retreating before the warmth of dawn's promise. Rising from the piano, Clara tucked the jewels safely into a worn velvet pouch, the weight now less a burden and more a symbol of justice reclaimed. She stood at the attic window, gazing out over the wild overgrown gardens where sunlight sifted through the tangled branches, painting dappled patterns that danced with life renewed. Her silhouette was framed by the soft glow, a figure transformed, not defined by loss, but by resilience. Pulling the letter Lydia had left once more from her pocket, Clara read the final line aloud, her voice sure but tender. "Find me in their light." The sun dipped below the horizon, streaking the sky with hues of violet and rose, the closing of a chapter and the hush before unfolding truth. With deliberate steps, Clara descended the attic stairs, each creak a heartbeat of newfound strength and purpose. She was no longer the woman drowned in grief and secrets. She was a torchbearer, carrying the light of reconciliation forward. As she reached the entry hall, the manor seemed to stand taller, the weight of years lifting, shadows folding back into corners being bathed in gentle warm light. Clara paused, hand resting lightly on the worn banister, eyes steady and clear. The final confrontation loomed, a precipice of truth balanced between justice and forgiveness. She inhaled deeply, the scent of old wood and lavender filling her senses, anchoring her to the moment. "It's time," she murmured, the words both a vow and a beacon. The piano's last notes lingered on the air behind her like a promise, the melody of broken pasts harmonizing with the hope of what was yet to come. In that silent breath, a fragile, radiant pause, Clara stood reborn, poised on the edge of dawn, ready to face whatever shadows remained with unshakable courage. Soft hues of dawn spilled through the once shadowed windows, now unbarred and shining with gentle promise. The manor, silent in its renewed stillness, seemed to breathe more freely, each sunbeam casting fractured gold across the worn oak floors and faded drapes. Clara moved carefully through the space, her steps light but deliberate, as if hesitant to disturb the fragile peace she now carried inside. Her hands brushed reverently over the piano keys, the same instrument that had once echoed with laughter, secrets, and silent tears of sisters lost in time. Now, with the dust gently settling across its surface, it felt differentless, a relic of despair and more a vessel of new beginnings. A single sheet of sheet music, long forgotten, lay open on the music stand, its notes faint but promising. She settled onto the bench and, listening to the stillness, finally allowed herself to breathe fully for the first time in what felt like eternity. The melody she played was from her youth, a tune that Lydia used to hum, soft, simple, and full of quiet resilience. Her fingers moved with tentative grace, each note a step healing old wounds, each chord weaving threads of forgiveness and acceptance into her slowly mending heart. As the melody filled the air, she closed her eyes, envisioning a time when family meant something whole, when love was enough to carry the weight of secrets. Her mind drifted through memories, flickering like photographs in a fading album, and she silently forgave herself for the years of pain, for the silence that had nearly suffocated her. The sun's rays grew warmer, spilling across the scene like a benediction. Outside, the overgrown garden shimmered in the light. Wildflowers danced softly in the breeze, unburdened now by neglect. The world was still, yet vibrant, the first signs of rebirth stirring into existence. Clara's fingers lingered on the keys, a tender smile touching her lips as she let the music breathe and rise, no longer just a reflection of her sorrow but a hymn to resilience. Here, in this quiet, sacred space, she felt the truth settle quietly into her bones. Healing was a process, slow, gentle, ongoing. She gazed towards the window, the landscape bathed in morning's quiet beauty. The manor stood as a testament not only to loss but to renewal, cracks and shadows of the past softened by newfound acceptance. A tear slipped silently down her chin, not of despair, but of peaceful release, of finally laying down the burdens she had carried for so long. With a final, lingering note, Clara's fingers rested on the keys. She sat still, eyes closed, listening to the faint echo of her music blending with the breeze, a symphony of reconciliation whispered in the dawn's tender light. The house, the garden, and her soul had begun their slow, sacred dance toward peace, the past settling behind her, a gentle closing that promised more gentle awakenings ahead. The soft glow of morning streamed through the dusty windows of the manor, illuminating a scene of quiet transformation. Clara moved slowly across the room, each step imbued with a deliberate grace she had long thought absent. The air was warm now, filled with a gentle, expectant silence that spoke volumes of healing, of acceptance, of the quiet release of burdens long carried. Her fingers brushed lightly over the worn keys of the piano, where once silent melodies now stirred into a tender refrain, an old tune from her youth, woven with the echoes of Lydia's laughter and whispers of reconciliation. She paused, closing her eyes, letting the music wash over her, each note releasing a pent-up ache, each chord a gentle benediction. Outside, the overgrown gardens, once wild and unruly, seemed to breathe a new life, the moss-covered stones glowing softly in the morning light. Flower-swirled roses, bluebells, and drifts of daisies began to reclaim space, pushing through cracks and crevices as if to say that growth was inevitable. Clara stood still, a subtle smile on her face. In that moment, she saw her reflection in the dusty mirror, no longer a woman worn thin by grief, but a soul reborn from the ashes of betrayal and sorrow. The past shadows still lingered, but the light had found a way to seep through. She reached for the letter Lydia had written, an unspoken gift of forgiveness and love, and gently placed it on the piano. Her fingers lingered on the paper's folds. "Thank you," she whispered, voice filled with a quiet, heartfelt gratitude. "For the love you gave, for the pain we shared, and for the peace you finally helped me find." A slow breath lifted her chest, the weight of years lifting, replaced by a serene clarity. The house, once a prison of secrets, now felt like a sanctuary, an inheritance of wounds healed and bonds restored. Her gaze turned toward the garden, where the sunlight spilled anew across the landscape, the promise of new beginnings. Every flower, every leaf, seemed to nod in agreement. The shadows of betrayal and loss no longer held dominion. Holding Lydia's letter close, Clara stepped toward the window, her silhouette bathed in light, eyes shimmering with the glow of forgiveness, not just for her sister, but for herself. She had faced the darkness, discovered the truth, and chosen to let go. The wind gently stirred her hair as she reached out and opened the window wider, letting fresh air and sunlight flood her soul, filling every hollow with hope. The manor stood quietly in the radiant dawn, a testament to the resilience of love, family, and the unending possibility of redemption. And in that tranquil moment, Clara sat back at the piano, her fingers poised once more on the keys. She played the tune, a lullaby of forgiveness, peace, and love, filling the space with quiet joy as rays of sunlight poured over her, right through the dust motes, signs of her inner renewal shining brighter than ever before. A gentle hush fell over the manor as the golden light of late afternoon seeped through the dust-laden windows, casting long, soft shadows across the worn wooden floorboards. The air was thick with a quiet reverence, a stillness that spoke of endings and new beginnings intertwined. Clara sat quietly on the restored piano bench, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, now no longer trembling but steady, reverent. She looked across the room, taking in the familiar silence, the subtle glow of sunlight touching every corner, every artifact that had once been cloaked in grief. The faint scent of lavender and aged wood filled her senses, aromas that had become symbols of her journey, bitter, healing, and finally intertwined in harmony. Clara gently pressed a key, a note pure and clear. It resonated softly, filling the space with a melody woven from the threads of past and present. The tune was simple, a lullaby from her childhood, a song Lydia had loved, now a gift she bestowed upon her own soul. Each note lifted the heavy weight of sorrow, transforming it into acceptance, forgiveness, and peace. Outside, the overgrown garden bloomed in silent defiance, wildflowers dancing gently in a breeze stirred by the fading day, delicate petals embracing the sunlight, unburdened by the shadows of the past. The manor, too, seemed to breathe more freely, its walls no longer enclosing pain but echoing with quiet serenity. Clara's eyes closed, and she let her fingers drift across the keys, the music a gentle bridge linking her childhood, her sister's love, their shared suffering, and the redemption she now embraced. She saw Lydia's face in her mind's eye, a soft smile of reconciliation, a silent reassurance that her journey had reached its tranquil end. A single tear traced its quiet path down her cheek, catching the last rays of sunlight, the kind of tear that knew peace had finally settled within, as resolute as the golden light that warmed her skin. She whispered softly into the stillness, "Thank you for everything." The melody continued, tender and unhurried, as though time and sorrow had been washed away in this fleeting, sacred moment. Shadows lengthened across the room, but within this sanctuary, the light prevailed, the eternal testament to love reclaimed and wounds healed. The piano's notes lingered in the air, a silent prayer of peace that stretched beyond the boundary of pain into eternity. The camera slowly pulled back, leaving Clara in her quiet sanctuary, her face soft with serenity, her soul finally at rest, bathed in the lingering glow of reconciliation. And as the scene faded to gentle darkness, the last thing seen was a single, fragile flower unfurling in the overgrown garden, standing resilient, a symbol of hope reborn from the ruins, whispering softly into the coming silence that peace, however tender, was now eternal. How would you react to an unexpected family secret? Share your thoughts below.